Aking had always known she was different, long before anyone ever dared to say it out loud. From the moment she opened her eyes as a newborn, midwives gasped and crossed themselves, whispering prayers to whichever god they believed might hear them. Her eyes were not the soft brown or deep black common to the village children. They glowed, faint, warm, ember-like, as though two tiny fires lived quietly inside them. As she grew older, the glow only deepened, pulsing whenever she felt strong emotions. And though she never understood why her eyes were like that, she carried herself with a softness that made her seem more human than anyone else around her. But people feared what they did not understand, and in the drought-stricken land of Eneroro, fear spread faster than the flames they worshipped. The sun beat down harshly every day, cracking the earth open like dry skin. Rivers shrank. Wells deepened. Crops curled in on themselves before ever seeing harvest. Fires, once considered sacred gifts, became dangerous warnings. The villagers whispered that the fire gods were angry, punishing them for some unseen sin. And for many, Aking's eyes were the easiest explanation. Children ran past her hut shouting, "Fire follows her. Heat gathers where she walks." Some elders would yank their children away when she passed, muttering under their breath, afraid her gaze might ignite their clothes. Even when Aking fetched water for the old, swept the community grounds, or helped repair broken fences, no good deed could quiet the rumors. To them she was a curse wrapped in gentle skin. Her step-family fed these whispers more eagerly than anyone else. Her stepmother, Mama Kendi, often stood in the doorway with arms folded, eyes narrowed, watching Aking return from chores. "You think helping others will change what you are?" she would say, voice cold as stone. A walking ember. A reminder of bad luck. Her stepbrother, Olam, enjoyed repeating it even louder, especially when others could hear. When he noticed her flinch, he smirked like someone who enjoyed pressing on bruises. Still, Aking remained quiet, carrying her burdens with the patience of someone who had learned early that fighting fear only fed it. She spent many evenings alone on the hilltop overlooking the sacred volcano, the one place where fear could not chase her. The volcano stood like a giant watching over the land, its cracks glowing faintly at night. The elders often told stories of the fire sprites, tiny ancient beings who lived inside those molten cracks, dancing unseen in the heat. It was said they were older than gods, older than humans, and older than the fires they commanded. Some believed the sprites brought blessings. Others believed they brought ruin. But every story agreed on one thing: anyone born with flame-touched eyes was spiritually connected to them. Aking never claimed to see them clearly, but sometimes when the world grew too quiet, she felt flickers at the edges of her vision, tiny sparks skittering across the darkness like insects made of fire. And whenever danger lurked nearby, like a wild animal crossing paths or a storm about to descend, her eyes would flicker brighter, warming her eyelids, warning her in a way she could never explain. Yet the village did not see her abilities as gifts. They saw her glow and thought of burning fields. They saw her calm and imagined hidden power waiting to erupt. They saw her standing near the sacred volcano at dusk and whispered, "She is calling the fire spirits." Aking would simply lower her gaze and continue walking, her gentle footsteps stirring dust on the cracked earth. She never argued, never defended herself. But every night as she lay on her mat listening to her stepmother curse her existence from the next room, she wondered quietly if perhaps the villagers were right, if maybe the fire inside her meant something, and if someday, it would awaken in ways none of them expected. The days grew harsher as the drought tightened its grip on Eneroro. What little hope the villagers still carried began to crack like the earth beneath their feet. Every morning they stepped outside hoping to see clouds, but the sky remained a dry, merciless blue. The crops, once green and generous, now stood stiff and brittle, their leaves curled inward like dying hands reaching for something that would never come. The farmers walked through their fields in silence, crushing dead stalks beneath their feet, the sound brittle and painful like breaking bone. There was no harvest left to save. Hunger became a quiet shadow following everyone, growing heavier each day. Then came the fires. At first it was a single hut, burnt during the night while the owners were sleeping. The family escaped barely in time, coughing smoke and disbelief. The following night, another fire erupted near the granary, forcing the villagers to scramble with buckets of dirt. The third night, a cluster of trees near the riverbank went up in flames so suddenly that villagers claimed they heard laughter inside the crackling. No one could explain it. Fires had always been sacred, controlled, ritualistic. Fire was not supposed to roam freely on its own. Not like this. Fear spread faster than the flames themselves. Mama Kendi wasted no time twisting the moment to her advantage. She stood in the village square, clutching her shawl dramatically, and announced to everyone willing to listen. These fires started when that girl began wandering at night with her ember eyes glowing. She summons fire. She always has. You all saw her eyes flicker like coals. She pointed toward Akiing's hut, stirring panic like a spoon stirring hot stew. Her voice rose with genuine hatred. You think these fires are accidents? No. They are her doing. Some villagers protested weakly. She helps us. She is kind. But their voices were thin, easily drowned by fear. Soon people began claiming they had seen strange things. A drunken fisherman swore he saw Akiing standing near the river long after midnight, her eyes glowing so bright he thought dawn was breaking. A group of children swore they saw her silhouette near the granary minutes before it burned. Even though no one could prove anything, the stories layered themselves like dry leaves waiting for a spark. The village council gathered, sitting beneath the baobab tree, discussing her fate. They were cautious men, old enough to distrust rumors but wise enough to fear the strange. One councilman stroked his gray beard and said, "Maybe the child is innocent." Another shook his head. "But the fire follows her." They debated for hours, but every argument circled back to the same knot. Fear makes even wise men foolish. Things worsened when the fire priests arrived. They came from the neighboring region, 3 tall figures dressed in ash-colored robes, faces painted with soot, carrying staffs tipped with coal. Their presence alone made villagers tremble. The priests walked through Enaroro slow and solemn, inspecting the burnt places, touching the earth, sniffing the air as though fire left a scent only they understood. At the end of their inspection, the eldest priest summoned the council and declared in a grave voice, "Her eyes do not belong to humans." The word struck the village like a hammer. Even those who had defended Akiing felt their courage retreat. Suspicion thickened the air until it felt suffocating. People began watching her every move. Whispers followed her like shadows. Some villagers avoided passing near her, taking long detours just to escape the sight of her eyes. Children threw pebbles and ran away shrieking. Even the wind seemed to blow differently around her, as if carrying people's fear like dust. But Akiing in her innocence still tried to help. On the 5th night of unexplained fires, the priest's hut caught flame. Akiing was the first to grab a calabash and run toward the blaze, shouting for others to join her. But as she approached, a group of women screamed and pushed her away. "Don't come near. You'll make it worse," one shouted. Another hurled a handful of dirt at her. "Leave, you cursed child." Akiing stood frozen, dusty and humiliated, clutching the calabash as flames reflected in her glowing eyes. She felt the heat of the fire, but the sting of rejection burned hotter. Every attempt she made to offer help was met with fear. She finally set the calabash down and stepped back, watching the villagers fight the flames without her, watching them glance over their shoulders to ensure she kept her distance. She turned away only when she felt tears threatening to fall, not because she feared being seen crying, but because she feared what her tears might look like glowing in the firelight. The elders had always spoken of the fire sprites in low, trembling voices, as if the very mention of them might summon sparks from beneath the earth. In Enaroro, fire was older than any god, older than any tribe, older than the ground people walked on. And within that ancient fire lived the beings the elders feared most, creatures as mysterious as they were powerful. When the drought worsened and fires began appearing without cause, the villagers returned to the old stories, hoping to understand the danger surrounding them. On a sweltering afternoon, the elders gathered beneath the shade of the great baobab tree, calling the younger villagers to sit before them. Their faces were marked with deep lines, the kind carved by many years of fearing the unknown. Elder Maji, the oldest among them, cleared his throat and began to speak in the slow rhythmic way that made even the wind pause to listen. "The fire sprites," he said, "were the first children of flame. Tiny glowing beings no larger than a thumb, born from the cracks of molten rivers beneath the volcano. They crawl along the lava like ants of fire, feeding on whatever is thrown into their home." His voice grew softer. "Offerings feed them. But they do not always return blessings." Elder Penyu added, "They are creatures of hunger. It is said they devour the souls of the unworthy and return nothing but ashes. That is why our ancestors respected them. Not worshipped. Not loved. Feared." The villagers muttered among themselves, shifting uneasily. Elder Maji continued, "Only those with fire-gifted eyes can see them clearly. To all others they appear as sparks, as flickers at the edge of vision. But to the chosen, oh yes, to the chosen they are living beings. They dance, they whisper, they call." His voice trembled slightly. "Such people are rare. Marked at birth. Their eyes glow like embers, their spirits tied to the molten world. Every head in the gathering turned slowly, inevitably, toward Akiing's hut. Whispers surged like heat waves. You see? It fits her. Her eyes, they burn. Like the sprites. She is marked. Marked by the fire beneath. Rumors began to curl around the village like smoke. By sunset, the whispers hardened into confident claims. By nightfall, fear shaped itself into a story the villagers repeated as though it were truth. Akiing is one of them. She is their lost child. She calls them with her glowing eyes. She is the reason the fires roam free. And no one fed these rumors more eagerly than Mama Kendi. She visited every group of villagers she could find, her voice dripping with false concern. I raised that girl like my own, she said, though everyone knew this was a lie. But her eyes, you've all seen them. Even as a baby, fire flickered inside them. What if the fire sprites are calling her home? What if she brought their anger? She spoke with such practiced sorrow that people believed her without question. She placed her hand dramatically on her chest and whispered, My own son fears sleeping under the same roof as her. Who can blame him? What child would want to share a house with a creature of fire? With each retelling, her lies grew more polished, more convincing. She wanders near the volcano at dusk. I've seen her, Mama Kendi insisted. She knows the fire's language. She must be sending messages to the sprites. Villagers nodded, murmuring agreement, letting fear guide their thoughts. Their suspicion, once faint, now grew into certainty. Akiing was no longer simply strange, she was dangerous. A threat. A spark waiting to ignite the entire village. And though Akiing kept to herself, trying to tread lightly in a world that wanted her gone, there was no way to escape a rumor that had already caught flame. The story of her being the fire sprite's lost child spread across Enaroro faster than the drought, faster than hunger, faster than the truth ever could. The plan to rid the village of Akiing did not begin with a public accusation. It began quietly, like a spark hidden beneath dry grass, small, unnoticed, but dangerous enough to consume everything once wind touched it. And the wind, as always, came in the form of Mama Kendi's voice. She had already filled the villagers' ears with fear, but she knew rumors alone were not enough. If she wanted Akiing gone, she needed the chief's authority behind her words. So one evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, she went to Chief Barasa's hut. She approached him with her shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders, her face arranged into the perfect mask of a grieving, frightened mother. "Chief," she said in a trembling voice, "I beg you to hear me." Her tone alone made him gesture for her to enter. Inside the dimly lit hut, she knelt dramatically before him. "I fear for my family," she whispered. "For the village. For all of us." The chief narrowed his eyes but did not interrupt. Mama Kendi pressed on. "The fires, the whispers, the drought. You've seen them. You felt the heat rising in ways no man can explain." Chief Baresa sighed heavily. "Yes, but we blame too quickly. Fear clouds judgment." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Fear is the only thing keeping your people alive. And the cause of that fear lives under my roof." Her eyes glistened with false tears. "It is Akiing. The child with ember eyes. The one born marked." The chief stiffened. "Kendi, those are rumors." "Rumors?" she snapped, then caught herself, softening her tone again. "Forgive me. But how many fires must burn before we open our eyes? The fire priests themselves said she is not fully human. You heard them." The chief did not respond. Emboldened, she added, "When she walks, the earth warms. When she looks at someone, their skin prickles. The fire sprites are angry, Chief Baresa. And they will not calm until we return their lost child." She bowed her head dramatically. "Please. Before the whole village burns." Whether her words convinced him or whether his own fears finally overpowered his judgment, no one would ever know. But that night he called for a village meeting. When the drums sounded through Enaroro, people gathered quickly, sensing the heaviness in the air. The baobab tree cast giant shadows across the crowd as torches flickered around them. Akiing approached hesitantly, feeling the pressure of dozens of eyes on her. Her glowing gaze darted nervously from one face to another, but she found no comfort in any of them. Chief Baresa raised his hand. "We are here to speak of the strange fires," he began. The murmurs that followed were immediate, fearful. "And of Akiing." His voice faltered for a moment as the girl stiffened in the crowd. "There are concerns that she is the cause of our suffering." Akiing stepped forward slowly. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Chief, villagers, please," she said softly. "I have done nothing. I only try to help." Her voice trembled. I do not summon fire. I cannot control heat. I only want to live in peace. Mama Kendi let out a loud mocking gasp. Peace? You speak of peace while our homes burn around us. She pointed a shaking finger. Look at her eyes. Look how they glow even now. Some villagers nodded, their fear shaping their thoughts. Aking shook her head desperately. They glow when I'm afraid, she said. Not because of fire. Because I am different. Her voice cracked. But different does not mean cursed. Her words, filled with truth, drifted across the crowd, and fell to the ground unheard. Her stepbrother, Olam, stepped forward with a sneer. He grabbed her by the arm roughly, pulling her closer to the torchlight. Look, he shouted. Look at her eyes now. And indeed, her eyes flickered, two trembling sparks reflecting her terror. The villagers recoiled. She's burning inside, a woman screamed. She's waking the sprites, cried another. Aking tried to pull away but Olam tightened his grip, enjoying the pain he caused. Stop, she whispered. Please. Chief Baresa raised his voice above the chaos. Silence. The crowd quieted. He looked at Aking with sorrow carved deep into his face. Aking, whether you mean harm or not, the village is suffering. We must appease the fire gods. The fire sprites, they demand purity. And sacrifices have stopped the fires before. His voice softened. We will offer them your spirit, hoping they show mercy. Aking felt the world tilt beneath her. Sacrifice. The word echoed like a drum inside her skull. The villagers watched, waiting for her to protest. She didn't. Her throat tightened, squeezing her voice away. She looked around the circle, at faces she had helped, faces she had smiled at, faces she thought might someday understand her. None met her gaze. Not one. I understand, she whispered, though she didn't. Her heart cracked so quietly no one heard it. If my death will save the village. Her stepmother smirked behind the chief's back. Aking lifted her chin as tears rimmed her ember-lit eyes. I will go. Not because she believed she deserved it, but because no one else believed she didn't. Night settled over Enararo like a shroud of smoke. The village was unnaturally quiet, as if every hut, every tree, every stone held its breath for what was about to happen. Even the wind refused to move. The only sound came from the distant rumble of the volcano, the place no one visited willingly, the place where the fire sprites were said to feed. Aking stood in the center of the village, her wrists bound tightly with coarse rope. The fibers cut into her skin, leaving raw marks, but she didn't struggle. She didn't cry. Her eyes, dimmed by sorrow, glowed faintly like dying embers, soft, trembling, unsure. Villagers surrounded her in a tight circle, some holding torches, some holding stones, all holding fear. Mama Kendi stood among them, her face schooled into an expression of forced grief, her hands folded dramatically over her chest. But her eyes, they gleamed with victory. The fire priests arrived last. Their robes of ash-colored cloth dragged through the dirt as they approached. Each carried a staff tipped with a glowing ember. They formed a triangle around Aking, chanting under their breath in a language no one else understood. The sound was low and vibrating, like the rumble of fire deep underground. Chief Baresa stepped forward. His face was heavy with guilt, yet firm with decision. Tonight, he announced, we return to the fire what belongs to the fire. May the fire sprites accept this offering and spare the village from further destruction. The villagers murmured in agreement. Some wouldn't look at Aking. Others stared too long, trying to memorize the cursed girl who had caused them so much fear. Olam, her stepbrother, grabbed her arm and shoved her forward. Move, he snarled as if she were some wild animal refusing to obey. She stumbled, almost falling, but regained her footing without a word. The procession began. They walked through the silent village, past the dying crops, past the scorched huts, past the sacred drums covered in layers of ash. The path grew steeper as they approached the volcano, the ground beneath them heating with every step. The sky above glowed dark red as if stained with fire's breath. Ash drifted from the clouds like gray snow, settling on their hair, their shoulders, their lashes. Aking coughed, tasting smoke in her throat. The closer they came to the volcanic ridge, the more the air shimmered with heat. The villagers slowed, fear gripping them anew. Some whispered prayers, some clutched amulets, some refused to lift their heads. The volcano's mouth came into view, a massive pit glowing with molten fire, its edges cracked and blackened. It hissed and roared like a living beast. If one listened closely, one could hear faint, eerie crackles that did not sound like normal fire. They sounded like hundreds of tiny voices whispering from beneath the earth. The fire priests formed a circle around the pit. Their chanting grew louder, deeper, building into a rhythmic pulse that matched the volcano's heartbeat. Aking was led to the edge. Her feet trembled. Not from fear of death, but from the weight of betrayal. The villagers she had helped, smiled at, prayed beside. These were the same ones tying her wrists, offering her to flames that had never been her friends. A gust of hot wind blew across her face. Her ember eyes flickered, reflecting the fire below. One of the fire priests lifted his staff high. "Return what does not belong to the living," he chanted. The others echoed him. "Return what does not belong. Return what is marked. Return the child of flame." The villagers bowed their heads in fear. Aking lifted her chin. "I was never theirs," she whispered. But no one heard. With a nod from the chief, Olam and two other men tightened their grip on her arms and dragged her the final step to the pit. She gasped as the heat scorched her skin, the air itself burning to breathe. The priests raised their hands. The chanting rose. The villagers watched with wide, terrified eyes. And then, they pushed her. She fell. The world became a blur of heat and red light. The roar of the fire swallowed every sound except one, crackling whispers that curled around her like invisible hands. The whispers grew louder, clearer, almost welcoming. She closed her eyes. The fire wrapped around her body like a hungry serpent. Flames licked her skin, her hair, her clothes. Pain exploded through her, but strangely beneath the pain she felt something else. Recognition. The fire knew her. As her body disappeared into the molten glow, the villagers waited for the end they expected. The hiss of burning flesh, the final crackle, the settling of ashes. But instead, the fire rose. It surged upward in a towering column of blinding light. The pit blazed brighter than ever before, brighter than any flame the villagers had seen in their lives. The earth trembled. The air vibrated. The volcano roared with fury and life. And from deep within the fire, a scream erupted. But it was not Aking's. It was a shrill, ringing, inhuman scream, something ancient, something furious, something awakened. The villagers staggered back in terror. The fire sprites had answered. The moment Aking slipped beneath the surface of the flames, the world she knew vanished like smoke scattered by wind. Her body should have burned, should have screamed, should have turned to ash, but instead she felt herself pulled deeper, as though the fire had hands that welcomed her. The roar of the volcano faded into a low hum, and soon she was floating through a tunnel of molten gold. The heat did not scorch her. It wrapped around her like warm breath. Her ember eyes opened slowly, adjusting not to darkness, but to a realm where everything glowed. She found herself standing, though the ground beneath her was not solid stone, but liquid fire hardened just enough to hold her weight. Around her, the cavern walls pulsed with veins of lava, each pulse like the heartbeat of an ancient beast watching from beneath the world. She heard crackling voices whispering her name, not with malice but with recognition. The fire sprites revealed themselves one by one, tiny beings the size of fists, shaped like flickering flames with faces that shifted as they moved. Hundreds, no thousands, hung on the cavern walls like living sparks. Some glided in the air like embers caught in wind. Others clung to molten stone, blinking at her with fiery eyes of their own. For the first time she saw them clearly. For the first time they did not hide. One sprite crept close enough for her to see its expression soften. Not hunger, not wrath, but familiarity, as though it had waited for her. Then the others parted as a towering figure approached, 4 times the size of the rest. His body burned bright white at the core, surrounded by swirling red flames like a cloak. His voice crackled through the cavern as he addressed her by name. "Achin Wamoto," he said, calling her by the ancient name of fire-sided children, a name she had never heard but somehow recognized. "You have returned to where your spirit was forged." Aking staggered backward, trembling, unsure whether to run or kneel. I'm not supposed to be here," she whispered. "I was thrown. They sacrificed me." "We know," said the leader, who finally introduced himself as Ogun Kai, guardian of the inner flame. "The living feared what they could not understand. And those who feared you most were the ones who envied you." She felt the truth before he even spoke it fully, the memories of her stepmother's sharp tongue, the hatred in her stepbrother's eyes, the heavy silence of the villagers. But Ogun Kai showed more, images made of fire itself, dancing in the air like visions. She saw her mother kneeling before a sacred flame long before Aking was born. She heard a prophecy that her child would carry ember sight, a gift of protection. She saw her stepmother overhearing the prophecy and twisting it into fear so the village would believe Aking cursed. Her heart cracked as each vision flared and faded. They all believed her lies, Aching murmured. Even when I tried to help them. Humans often turn against their protectors, Ogunkai said gently. But you are not meant to die by their fear. The sprites swarmed around her, weaving trails of fire that circled her body like warm ribbons. Instead of burning her skin, they melted into her, feeding her with ancient heat. She gasped as her bones filled with molten strength, as fire ran through her veins like living blood. Her eyes brightened until they glowed so fiercely the sprites bowed their heads. You feel no pain because you were born of fire, Ogunkai continued. You can withstand what no human can. You can become what you were meant to be. Aching felt her breath deepen, her spine straighten. For the first time in her life she did not fear her own eyes. She understood herself. But then, another vision rose. Her village celebrating her sacrifice. Her stepmother smiling. Her stepbrother drinking beer beside the flames of a torched granary, pretending to mourn her death. The elders shaking their heads. The children whispering, relieved that the curse was gone. Fire trembled inside Aching, bright, hungry. You have a choice, Ogunkai said, stepping closer until his presence warmed her face. Return to the world above as a guardian, peaceful and distant from the wrongs committed. The cavern darkened as he finished. Or return with our fire, every flame we have ever held, and let your eyes carry the revenge the living carved into your fate. The sprites went silent. The molten walls stilled. Aching felt her ember eyes flicker, not with fear now, but with awakening. She looked into the swirling flames and saw her reflection. Someone reborn. Someone no longer fragile. Someone shaped by fire itself. And in that reflection, revenge glowed like a second sun. Aching did not hesitate long. The fire inside her pulsed in agreement even before her voice spoke. Her choice had already been made in the moment the villagers tied her wrists, in the moment her stepmother pretended to weep, in the moment she was thrown into the pit to die. The world above had chosen violence for her. Now she would choose what form that violence returned in. Slowly, she lifted her chin and looked into Ogunkai's blazing white eyes. I take the second path, she said, her voice steady despite the fire trembling under her skin. If they wanted fire, then let them taste it. The sprites around her crackled with approval, their lights flaring like sparks from a great bonfire. Ogunkai raised his arms and the entire cavern shifted. The molten floor rippled like disturbed water, and a column of pure flame rose beneath Aching, lifting her from the ground until she hovered above the lava lake. Heat wrapped around her but did not bite. Instead, the fire began spinning, forming a slow cyclone. Each rotation peeled away pieces of her old self, the dirt under her nails, the bruises on her arms, the scars left by cruel hands. All of it burned away like dry leaves. The flames then turned soft, like cloth woven from light. They wrapped around her limbs, her waist, her shoulders, her throat. Not a single thread was ordinary. Each strand carried the spirit of a fire sprite, its essence merging with hers. Tiny hands pressed against her skin before sinking into her, leaving trails of warmth that settled inside her bones. She felt them, hundreds of small heartbeats joining her own, like an army curling up beneath her ribs, ready to rise when called. She was no longer alone. Her skin changed next. It darkened into a deep, gleaming bronze, as if sculpted from volcanic rock polished by centuries of heat. She lifted her hands to look at them. They glowed faintly, veins filled with liquid fire instead of blood. Even the lines on her palms shifted, turning into ancient fire symbols she somehow understood, marks of guardianship, vengeance, destiny. Then came the eyes. Her ember-like eyes, which once only flickered gently, now burst into blazing orbs. 2 living suns. 2 molten cores capable of splitting rock, melting iron and reducing lies to powder. A single blink sent a shockwave of heat across the cavern, and the molten walls rippled in answer. A few sprites giggled, high crackling sounds, delighted by her new power. Aching gasped, but her breath sounded nothing like the girl she once was. It was a low, deep sound like wood crackling in a fire pit, like flames curling through a dry forest. Even her voice had transformed. When she spoke, it echoed with layered tones, the undertone of fire, the whisper of sprites, and the quiet grief of the girl she had been. What am I becoming? She murmured. Ogunkai bowed his great fiery head. Not becoming. Becoming again. This form is your spirit's truth. More flames gathered around her, swirling faster, brighter. Her hair dissolved into fire itself, lifting and flowing around her head like a crown of burning braids. Each strand moved with a will of its own, bending and snapping like torches in the wind. Sparks fell from her fingers, dancing in the air before rejoining her body. She felt taller, stronger, limitless. She felt the power of the sprites breathing with her. Each inhale fed their flames. Each exhale sent ash drifting across the cavern in soft gray clouds. She had no heartbeat now, only the rhythm of fire roaring inside her chest. The flames that cocooned her finally burst outward in a brilliant explosion of red and gold, shooting upward like a pillar of dawn. The cavern shook with the force. Every sprite bowed, circling her in spirals of reverence. She hovered above the molten lake for a moment longer, suspended in a halo of heat. Then she descended. Her feet touched the ground, and the stone sizzled beneath them. She walked with a new weight, not heaviness but presence. Even her shadow moved differently, flickering like a living flame instead of a still shape. She was no longer Aching the orphan, the quiet girl with strange eyes. She was something ancient, resurrected. She was the flame bride. Named not for marriage but for union, the sacred bonding of human and fire spirit, mortal and inferno. A bride of flame itself, forged for vengeance. She looked toward the path that led back to the surface world, and her eyes burned brighter than the molten pools around her. The sprites gathered behind her in a great wave of firelight, ready to follow their new queen. She rose from the heart of the volcano, reborn, unstoppable, and carrying a fire the world above had never seen. The village erupted in false celebration. Torches flickered in the warm night air as the villagers cheered, clapping each other on the back. They believed the sacrifice had been accepted, that the fire sprites had been appeased, and that the girl with ember eyes had been reduced to nothing more than ash. Drums pounded, songs rose, and even Mama Kendi allowed herself a smile, triumphant at the sight of everyone convinced that her schemes had worked. Children laughed in the distance, unaware of the storm gathering above the volcano's mouth. Then the ground trembled. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the soil, growing louder with each second. The celebration faltered as the villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Dust fell from the thatched roofs, and even the bravest among them stumbled. A fiery heat washed over them, carrying a scent of smoke and molten rock that made lungs sting and throats ache. The volcano erupted, not a trickle, not a harmless flare, but a roaring, surging torrent of flames that climbed skyward like a living tide. The molten fire twisted and stretched, coiling itself into a shape unmistakably human. A figure walked down the slope of the volcanic ridge, suspended in fire, moving toward the village with deliberate steps. The villagers froze, unable to scream as the flames formed the unmistakable shape of Aching. Her presence radiated such heat that torches ignited mid-air, and the night glowed as though the sun had returned. Her eyes shone brighter than any flame, two blazing orbs scanning every hut, every corner, every shadow. Each hut she passed seemed to quiver under her gaze. She did not need to look directly at anyone to see their secrets. Lies and deceit twisted and writhed in the air, visible to her alone, like smoke rising from hidden embers. No deception could hide. No denial could survive. People fell to their knees, clutching their chests, trembling as their sins and falsehoods were exposed. Parents looked at their children and found their own betrayals reflected in small, flickering flames. Farmers remembered the times they hoarded water while letting neighbors' crops die. Elders felt the weight of unspoken curses. The villagers' courage crumbled, leaving only terror in its wake. Mama Kendi's face drained of color. Her smile had vanished. For the first time she did not speak, could not plead, could not mask her guilt. Her heartbeat echoed so loudly in the collective fear that it was as if even the flames themselves could hear it. Her hands shook as she pressed them to her mouth, realizing too late that the fire she had manipulated for her own gain had become a mirror reflecting her crimes. The villagers' whispers faltered, replaced by choked sobs and desperate prayers, but none dared move as the figure of fire approached closer, closer to the center of the village. The flames writhed like snakes around her form, and yet she remained entirely composed, her posture regal, commanding. And then, in a voice that carried like a furnace blast, low and unstoppable, Aching spoke. Her words resonated across the night, burning into the ears and hearts of all who listened. You fed me to the fire, now the fire feeds on truth. The statement was not just a sentence, it was a reckoning. Every ember in the air seemed to leap higher, casting flickering shadows that revealed every hidden motive, every lie, every whispered betrayal. The villagers could do nothing but cower as the fire continued to walk, carrying the girl's vengeance in every glowing step, her eyes of revenge searing through the night. The village streets were a tableau of terror and awe as Aching moved through the center, her blazing eyes sweeping over every hut, every path, every hiding place. The fire around her did not roar blindly, nor did it consume indiscriminately. Instead, it danced with purpose, guided by her will. Sparks leapt into the air like flickering heralds, circling those whose hearts were heavy with guilt, coiling like serpents around the feet of liars, crawling along walls to expose deceit hidden in shadows. Innocent villagers felt only warmth brushing against their skin, a gentle reminder of the power they had witnessed, not the threat it carried. Mama Kendi tried to slip into the crowd, moving silently toward the edge of the village, hoping to escape the gaze that had already revealed her. But each step she took was met with a wall of heat that pulsed in rhythm with Aking's heartbeat. Flames rose, forming flickering barriers in her path. When she tried to step around one, another slithered in from the side, blocking her escape. Fear tightened around her chest as she realized there was no way out. The fire was alive, aware, and waiting. Aking's eyes scanned her stepmother once more, and she allowed the fire sprites to descend like tiny, glowing whispers. They crawled into the air, their voices carried on the hiss of flames, revealing in clear, crackling tones every secret, every betrayal, every whispered lie that Mama Kendi had spun to turn the village against her. The villagers staggered back, mouths agape as the truth of years of manipulation poured into their minds. The village chief stepped forward, his head bowed, his pride swallowed by shame. "I was weak," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I feared the fire and I feared the whispers. I did not defend you, Aking. I let fear silence me when courage was required. I am sorry." His confession hung in the air, a fragile admission that only barely brushed against the weight of justice. Mama Kendi shrank under the gaze of the fire, trying to twist her hands together to cover her face, to hide from the judgment that she had orchestrated for Aking. But the flames refused to leave her. They flickered along her skirts, coiled around her arms, climbed toward her face, yet did not burn her skin. Instead, they revealed her deeds in brilliant arcs of light, showing her deceit to the villagers in every glowing ember. Her lies ignited one by one, each truth appearing as a separate spark, dancing across the night like fireflies before joining the inferno surrounding her. "Enough," Aking said, her voice crackling like burning wood. The fire paused, coiling patiently around her stepmother. "You will confess or the flames will speak for you." Mama Kendi's voice trembled. I lied. I spread fear. I hated her because I could not bear her eyes, her gift. I wanted her gone." Her words spilled into the night, shaking through the village like thunder. "I am sorry. I am sorry." The fire pulsed with satisfaction, responding to the sincerity of her confession. A trail of coiled flames rose along the ground, forming a narrow path through the village square, stretching from one edge of the central plaza to the volcanic ridge that had birthed Aking's transformation. "You will walk this path," Aking instructed, "barefoot until the fire spirits judge that your remorse is true." The flames hovered slightly above the earth, hot enough to sear yet yielding under the weight of humility, a trail of penance rather than death. Mama Kendi's legs shook as she stepped onto the path. Every step sent sparks dancing upward, reflecting her shame and her guilt. Villagers watched silently, their fear of the fire tempered by awe at the fairness of the judgment. Some lowered their heads, others whispered prayers for mercy and forgiveness, realizing that this punishment was not cruelty, it was balance. Aking's eyes swept over the villagers again. The fire sprites hummed softly within her, coiling around her like a crown of light, their presence a reminder that truth and justice need not be violent. "Let this be remembered," she said, her voice carrying through the village, deep and resonant, "that lies may hide in shadows, but fire will always illuminate them." And as Mama Kendi walked the fire path, humbled and trembling, Aking stood tall, the flame bride, guardian of truth and fire, her ember eyes burning brighter than ever. The village could see that the flames no longer merely punished, they protected, purified, and revealed, carrying the reckoning in every flicker and crackle of their eternal glow. The first soft rains fell on Enararo as the villagers gathered in the central plaza, their eyes wide with awe. But these were no ordinary rains. The droplets shimmered with the faint glow of embers, each one warming the earth it touched. Where the fire had once punished, it now healed. The ground, cracked and dry from months of relentless drought, began to soften. Tiny green shoots pushed upward through the soil, reaching for the sky as if in gratitude. The air smelled sweet and smoky, a perfume of renewal. Aking walked among the villagers, her presence serene, her ember eyes now glowing gently with warmth rather than wrath. The crops that had withered under the oppressive sun began to flourish. Maize stalks straightened, beans climbed eagerly along trellises, and sorghum burst from the earth in bright, healthy stalks. Streams of water, long reduced to trickles, swelled with newfound life, carrying clear water to every corner of the village. The villagers watched, some kneeling, some clasping hands together in humble respect, as the land healed beneath Aching's quiet guidance. They finally understood that she had never been a curse, that the fire they had feared was not a weapon to destroy them, but a force meant to nurture and protect. The fire sprites circled around her, their tiny bodies flickering like lanterns, now free to dwell peacefully in the volcanic cracks and the sacred flames that lined the fire path. They no longer whispered threats. They hummed songs of comfort and warmth, wrapping their ancient magic around the village like a protective shield. The villagers bowed before Aching, acknowledging her as the true guardian of the land. Children ran to touch her hands, laughing as the faint heat warmed their palms without burning them. The elders nodded solemnly, offering apologies for their fear and their doubt. Aching took her place at the ridge overlooking the village, stepping onto the stone path that led to the volcano's heart. From here she could see the village thriving, the crops waving in the breeze, and the soft embers drifting down from the sky. She was no longer a victim of fear and betrayal. She had become the guardian of the fire path, the protector who carried both the fury and the mercy of the flames within her. She looked to the horizon as dawn crept over the mountains. The soft light mixed with the fading glow of the volcanic embers, painting the sky in golds and oranges. The villagers moved below, their lives now intertwined with the magic and protection she offered. In that moment, Aching understood the balance of fire, not only to punish but also to nurture. The fire sprites flitted around her, small sparks of light echoing the rhythm of her heart. And she knew that as long as she watched over Eneroro, the village would thrive, safe beneath the dual gift of fire, its warmth and its truth. Aching stood at the ridge of the volcano, her figure silhouetted against the rising sun. The sky stretched out in brilliant streaks of crimson and gold, reflecting off the faint ember glow in her eyes. She breathed deeply, feeling the cool morning wind mixed with the lingering heat of the volcanic rocks beneath her feet. The world below was waking, birds lifting into the sky, streams shimmering in the sun, villagers tending to crops that now thrived. It was a world transformed just as she had been. Her thoughts drifted to the journey that had led her here, the whispers of fear, the betrayal of those she once trusted, the fiery trial that had tried to consume her. She remembered the moment she was thrown into the molten pit, the crackling whispers that had guided her, the fire sprites that had nurtured her rebirth. Every flicker of flame had been a lesson, every ember a mirror of truth. Through pain and fire, she had learned not only the power she held, but also the responsibility it carried. Her eyes, once burning with vengeance, now glowed with purpose. The fire inside her no longer sought retribution, only balance and guidance. She had become a bridge between the world of humans and the world of flame, a protector who could see both truth and falsehood. She understood that fire, like justice, could destroy, but it could also illuminate, reveal, and heal. The villagers below looked up at her in awe, no longer in fear, understanding at last that the girl with ember eyes had been their savior all along. They would speak of this day for generations, the day when fire walked, when the cursed became a guardian, and when truth blazed brighter than lies. Aching's gaze stretched to the horizon. The world was vast, full of both danger and promise, yet she stood unwavering. In that light, she reflected, flames devour but they also reveal. They punish but they nurture. And sometimes what returns from the fire is stronger than what was taken. She lifted her arms slightly, the ember glow in her eyes mingling with the rising sun, and whispered quietly to herself, I am fire. I am truth. I am its guardian. Above, the fire sprites danced in tiny arcs of light, invisible to most but always present, a reminder that the fire's power belonged not to cruelty, but to justice, revelation, and protection. And as the sunrise bathed Eneroro in warmth, Aching knew one truth above all: the embers never lie.